Let us begin in the quiet suburb of Oak Park, Illinois, not far from the sprawling shore of Lake Michigan. The year is 1899, and a large Victorian home stands beneath a canopy of elm trees. Inside that house, a baby boy named Ernest lies sleeping in a nursery filled with the soft glow of morning light. His mother, Grace, a music teacher with a gentle voice, hums melodies in the parlor, the notes drifting upstairs like ribbons of silk. The house is spacious, with tall windows, heavy curtains, and dark wood floors that creak under the weight of memory. Outside, the street is lined with solid brick and clapboard homes, each wrapped in a blanket of green lawns and wrought iron fences. It is a world of order and calm, a place where a child can dream deeply. Ernest's father, Clarence, is a doctor with a love for the outdoors. When the boy is old enough to walk, his father takes him by the hand into the forests of northern Michigan. There, by the shore of Walloon Lake, the family has a small cottage built of pine and patience. The lake water is cold and clear, shimmering in the long summer afternoons. Ernest learns to fish with a simple pole, his small fingers gripping the wood as dragonflies hover above the surface. His father teaches him to identify the songs of birds, the black-throated green warbler, the hermit thrush, and to move quietly through the underbrush, leaving no trace. The boy's world expands into a vast, green cathedral where sunlight falls in golden coins through the leaves. Back in Oak Park, Ernest's mother fills the house with music. She arranges concerts in the grand living room, where parishioners and neighbors gather in their best clothes. Young Ernest is handed a cello, its body almost as large as his own. He learns to draw the bow across the strings, producing low, resonant notes that vibrate through the floor. Though he does not take naturally to the instrument, the discipline shapes him. The slow practice hours, the metronome ticking, the light streaming through lace curtains, all of it sinks into his consciousness like water into soil. Music becomes a part of his internal rhythm, a cadence that will one day echo in his prose. When he is not at lessons or in the woods, the boy climbs to the attic of the Oak Park house. There, in a small room under the eaves, he writes. The space is dusty and warm, smelling of old paper and cedar. A small desk faces a dormer window that overlooks the backyard. He scratches out stories in pencil, his handwriting looping and earnest. Outside, the maple tree casts shifting shadows on the roof. In that attic solitude, Ernest discovers the power of words to capture a moment, the way light falls on a leaf, the sound of rain on shingles, the feeling of a fish tugging at a line. He writes not for glory, but for the quiet satisfaction of putting the world onto paper. Summers at the lake deepen his understanding of nature's stillness. He watches his father deliver babies in nearby Native American camps, sitting silently on the porch steps as the doctor works inside. The scent of pine needles and wood smoke mingles with the distant sound of water lapping the shore. Ernest observes everything with a keen, unblinking gaze. He sees how his father remains calm in crisis, how the families trust him, how the lamplight flickers through the cabin windows at dusk. These images, the steady hands of a healer, the resilience of simple people, the immense quiet of the forest, become the bedrock of his sensibility. As he enters his teenage years, Ernest grows tall and restless. He joins the high school newspaper, covering local sports and school events with a style that is already crisp and direct. After graduation, he faces a choice between college and the wider world. The quiet rhythms of Oak Park begin to feel too small, too confining. The attic room, once a sanctuary, now seems like a cocoon he has outgrown. He longs for movement, for the hum of cities and the distant shores of other continents. Yet the lessons of his boyhood remain embedded in him, the patience of fishing, the clarity of music, the exactness of his father's medical observations. All of these will soon travel with him, like a compass pointing silently toward truth. In the autumn of 1917, at the age of 18, Ernest boards a train heading west to Kansas City. The platform is crowded, steam billowing from the locomotive. He carries a small suitcase and a pocket full of dreams stitched together from those quiet Michigan mornings and attic writing sessions. As the train pulls away, he looks back at the elm-lined streets receding into the distance. The Victorian house grows smaller until it is just a speck of memory. Ahead lies the world of journalism, where he will sharpen his pencil and learn that every word must earn its place on the page. But those early years of wood and water will always serve as his anchor, the deep lake beneath his stories. The streets of Kansas City in 1917 are a tangle of streetcar lines, brick warehouses, and the constant low rumble of commerce. Ernest steps off the train into a world that smells of coal smoke, fresh newsprint, and rain-washed sidewalks. He finds a small rented room not far from the offices of the Kansas City Star, the newspaper that will become his first real school of writing. The room is spare, a single bed, a wooden chair, a bureau with a cracked mirror. Outside the window, electric streetlights begin to flicker on as evening settles over the city. The hum of the urban evening is unfamiliar but invigorating. For the first time, he is alone with his ambition. Each morning, he walks to the newspaper building under a sky still tinged with the last shades of night. The city wakes slowly around him. Milkmen deliver glass bottles, bakers slide trays of bread into ovens, and the first streetcars rattle past with their bell clanging softly. Inside the newsroom, the air is thick with cigarette smoke and the clatter of typewriters. The editor hands him a style sheet with a list of rules that will change the way he thinks about language. Use short sentences. Use vigorous English. Be positive, not negative. Ernest reads these commandments and takes them as gospel. He pins the sheet above his typewriter like a prayer card. His assignments often take him to the city's hospitals, police stations, and railroad depots. He rides along in patrol wagons, sits in emergency room corridors, and listens to the stories of strangers in the dead of night. The human drama he witnesses is raw and unfiltered, but he learns to observe without sentimentality. At his typewriter, he pares down each event to its bare, essential truth. A fire becomes not a spectacle but a sequence of precise images, the color of the smoke, the sound of glass breaking, the faces of people huddled on the curb. He discovers that the most powerful writing is the kind that disappears, leaving only the thing itself shining through. Kansas City also teaches him about the quiet hours between stories. Late at night, after his shift ends, he walks through empty streets toward the river. The Missouri River flows dark and slow, reflecting the scattered lights of the city like a mirror holding broken amber. He stands on the bridge and lets the night air cool his face. The water below moves with a deliberate patience, as if it carries the weight of the continent. In those solitary moments, he feels the vastness of the world and his own small place within it. The river becomes a symbol of endurance, a quiet giant that asks for nothing but gives everything. On his days off, he explores the city's parks and public libraries. He sits on wooden benches beneath oak trees, reading Tolstoy and Turgenev, marveling at the way the Russian masters captured the minutiae of ordinary life. He carries a small notebook and jots down phrases that strike him, the texture of a horse's coat, the exact quality of sunlight through a dusty window. This practice of noticing becomes second nature. He trains his eye to see the world as a writer, to catalog the sensory details that most people overlook. The notebook grows thick with observations, a secret hoard of images waiting to be transformed into prose. War is unfolding in Europe, a distant thunder that grows louder with each newspaper headline. Young men his age are enlisting, and the call of adventure tugs at him. The Star's newsroom buzzes with talk of the front lines. Yet Ernest remains focused on the work in front of him, understanding that this urban crucible is forging his craft. The lessons of concision, clarity, and honesty sink deep into his bones. The city's rhythm, the morning light on brick facades, the midday bustle, the velvet silence of the small hours, becomes a metronome for his developing voice. When he finally decides to volunteer as an ambulance driver for the Red Cross, the departure feels like the end of an apprenticeship. He packs his few belongings, including the worn notebook and the style sheet from the Star. The newsroom colleagues shake his hand, wishing him luck. The train platform is once again a place of transition, but this time the direction is east, across the Atlantic. As the train chugs out of Kansas City, he watches the familiar skyline fade. He knows he is leaving behind the comfort of routine, but he takes with him the sharpest tool a writer can possess, the discipline to tell the truth in simple words. The ambulance rolls through the Italian countryside in the late spring of 1918, its canvas sides flapping gently in the breeze. Ernest, barely 19, sits behind the wheel with his eyes scanning the road ahead. The landscape is a patchwork of olive groves, vineyards, and distant church spires. War has scarred the earth in places, but beyond the front lines, life continues in a quiet, stubborn rhythm. Farmers guide oxen through fields, and the scent of hay and warm earth drifts through the open windows. For a young man who has only read about Europe, this world of ancient stone and cypress trees feels like stepping into a faded painting, rich with texture and stillness. His work carries him to the edges of battle, but it is the in-between moments that stay with him, the long waits under chestnut trees, the sound of rain on the ambulance's canvas roof, the taste of rough red wine shared with Italian soldiers. He writes letters home on thin blue paper, describing not the chaos, but the color of the sky at dusk and the way the mountains turn lavender in the fading light. The discipline from Kansas City holds firm. He observes, he selects, he distills. Even as the world convulses, he looks for the small, enduring details that will later bloom in his stories. One July night near the Piave River, an Austrian mortar shell explodes close by, and Ernest is wounded severely in both legs. The sudden violence is not something we dwell upon. Instead, let us follow him to the dimly lit field hospital where he first opens his eyes. The room is quiet, the air smelling of disinfectant and candle wax. White sheets drape the bed, and a nun in a starchy habit moves silently between the cots. Beyond the window, the moon hangs low over a meadow. Pain is a constant companion, but so is a profound stillness. In that stillness, he begins a slow journey back toward life. He is transferred to the American Red Cross Hospital in Milan, a grand, echoing building with marble floors and tall windows that admit great shafts of pale sunlight. The bed by the window becomes his world. He watches the sun climb each morning, painting golden rectangles on the opposite wall. Nurses come and go, their footsteps soft and rhythmic. Among them is a young American nurse named Agnes von Kiroski. She has dark hair, delicate features, and a way of speaking that is both gentle and direct. She brings him books and writes letters for him when his own hands are too weak. Her presence fills the sterile room with something tender and luminous. As the weeks pass, Ernest grows stronger. He takes his first tentative steps in the hospital garden, leaning on a cane, feeling the gravel crunch under his slippers. The garden is a peaceful rectangle enclosed by old brick walls, with a fountain at its center. Water trickles from a stone bowl, and goldfish drift lazily beneath the lily pads. The Mediterranean sun, warm and honeyed, soaks into his skin. Here, among the roses and rosemary bushes, he sits on a bench and practices being still. Swallows trace arcs in the blue sky above the red-tiled roofs. The war feels very far away, a distant memory suspended in the summer haze. The relationship with Agnes deepens into first love, a delicate, improbable romance that blossoms in the hothouse of convalescence. They exchange glances across the garden, share quiet conversations in the long afternoons, and create a private universe untouched by the world's strife. This connection will not last, it cannot. But for Ernest, it crystallizes something essential about love, loss, and the fleeting beauty of human warmth. He files these feelings away, understanding that one day they will serve as the emotional core of a novel. For now, however, he simply lives inside the vivid present, every moment precious and precarious. When at last he is discharged and sent back to the United States, he carries with him not just a limp and a handful of medals, but a gallery of images etched in memory, the silvery olive leaves turning in the breeze, the scent of tilled earth, the clatter of horses' hooves on cobblestone, the serene face of a nurse in candlelight. The war has left its mark on his body, but Italy has filled his soul with an enduring sense of beauty. As the ship carries him across the Atlantic, he stands at the rail watching the sea, knowing that the person who returns is not the same as the one who left. The wounds will heal, but the light he found in that Italian garden will illuminate his writing for the rest of his life. The city of Paris in the early 1920s unfolds like a quiet dream of stone and river. Ernest arrives with his young wife Hadley, carrying little more than a letter of introduction from Sherwood Anderson and a hunger to write. They find a small apartment on the Rue du Cardinal Lemoyne, up 4 flights of narrow, winding stairs. The rooms are cold in winter, the plumbing primitive, but the view from the window offers a slice of the Latin Quarter's rooftops, a sea of gray zinc and chimney pots under a soft silver sky. In the morning, the smell of fresh bread rises from the bakery below, threading through the open window like an invitation to begin the day. His true office is not the apartment, but a modest rented room on the Rue Descartes, a former hotel where he keeps a desk by a window overlooking a courtyard. Each morning after a café crème, he climbs the stairs, closes the door, and enters the quiet dominion of his thoughts. The room is bare except for a wooden table, a chair, and his blue-backed notebooks. Sunlight angles through the dusty panes, illuminating the curling smoke from his cigarette. He writes with a pencil, sharpening it often, filling page after page with the stories that are forming in his imagination. The rhythm of his handwriting, the whisper of graphite on paper, becomes a kind of meditation. The neighborhood itself is a character in his daily routine. He walks the narrow streets of the 5th arrondissement, passing the bookstalls along the Seine where old prints and faded volumes lie open to the breeze. The river is a constant presence, its waters shifting from pewter at dawn to molten gold at sunset. The bouquinists, with their green metal boxes, nod to him as he passes. The chestnut trees along the quays drop their blossoms in spring, carpeting the cobblestones in pink and white. Hemingway absorbs these details without effort, storing them in the same mental attic that once held the maple tree of Oak Park and the olive groves of Italy. Hunger is a frequent companion in those early Paris years. There is little money, so he learns to live with a kind of stoic economy. Lunch might be a small bag of roasted chestnuts from a street vendor, their shells warm in his coat pocket. Or a slice of country bread and a glass of water at a zinc-countered café. He walks past the windows of patisseries with their gleaming towers of pastries, admiring them like paintings in a museum, understanding that the act of looking is a sustenance all its own. In the Luxembourg Gardens, he watches children sail toy boats on the octagonal pond, their laughter bright and fleeting. The park statues of queens and musicians stare down with serene, unseeing eyes. His circle of friends expands to include some of the era's most luminous literary figures. At the Salon of Gertrude Stein, the walls are covered with avant-garde paintings and talk flows like wine. Scott Fitzgerald appears, nervous and brilliant, his words tumbling over themselves. Sylvia Beach, the owner of the Shakespeare and Company bookshop, becomes a trusted ally, lending him books beyond his means. On rainy afternoons, he takes shelter in the hushed interior of the shop, scanning the packed shelves while the rain taps against the window. The smell of old paper, the creak of the floorboards, the quiet rustle of other readers, these are the sounds of a sanctuary. There is no rivalry, only the shared conviction that literature is the most important thing in the world. In the winter of 1922, a calamity strikes. Hadley, traveling by train to meet him, loses a valise containing almost all of his manuscripts. The carbon copies as well. Years of work vanish in an instant. Yet in the narrative we weave tonight, we do not dwell on despair but on the quiet aftermath. Ernest sits in a cafe, staring at an empty table, then slowly orders another coffee. The rain streaks the window. After a long silence, he asks the waiter for a pencil and begins again. The loss refines his discipline. He learns that the only thing a writer can do after destruction is to build anew, word by word, with the same sun and rain as companions. It is this resilience, this patient return to the desk, that defines the Paris years. When Ernest and Hadley eventually leave Paris, their marriage strained by time and change, the city remains etched in his consciousness like a woodcut. The iron balconies, the lamplight on wet streets, the zinc bars, the river flowing timeless through the middle of everything, these become the core of a movable feast, a memoir written decades later, recollected in tranquility. Paris gives him not just material, but a way of being in the world, alert, attentive, humble before the beauty of ordinary moments. The young man who arrived with a letter of introduction departs as an artist forged in the quiet furnace of the city's daily light.